What's up? My name's Tim MacArthur. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Colorado, and this is episode number one of the Forensic Social Work Podcast. We'll see how this goes. I looked at a lot of podcasts out there and realized that there were none for forensic social workers, and I felt I needed to change that. So, starting now, there is one. Hopefully, it will be a good resource for anyone out there that might happen to stumble upon it. And if not, then it's just something for me to do with my time, starting now in quarantine, ironically. So, starting out this podcast, I'm interviewing a friend of mine, colleague from grad school. Her name's Megan Huffmeyer. She's working in Indiana currently with a pretty unique organization that I'll let her tell you more about. And she works a lot with the criminal justice system. So I wanted her to be my first guest because she's one of my best friends, and her work is very applicable to forensic social work. So without further ado, Megan Huffmeyer, welcome to episode one of the Forensic Social Work Podcast. You are the guest of honor. What's up, Meg?
Not a whole lot.
Well, tell me and whoever ever hears this, who are you? What do you do?
Okay. So my name is Megan Huffmeyer. I'm a licensed social worker in the state of Indiana. I work on an emergency response team serving the 7 southeastern counties, so kind of the tri-state area between Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. So we provide emergency response, mental health, and substance use services to a very rural area. I got into this field, graduated from University of Denver in 2015, and I've been in the field for about 3 years now. So
how are your clients involved in the criminal justice system?
So we have a referral line that's available basically 24/7, and anyone can make referrals. The whole point of the grant was designed to address the opioid epidemic. So it was tailored around having emergency responders call us on the scene of an overdose. So the police are involved that way. If not, referrals are made from the jails. So attorneys will call saying, hey, can you get my client into treatment as an alternative to like their sentencing? People being released from the jails. So we have 4 jails we're working with, and before inmates are released, they'll call us and say, hey, can you get this person services? We have probation officers that make referrals, so clients that are being court ordered to treatment services, they'll work with us that way. So it's really anyone that can make a referral. A lot of clients will call us once they get in trouble to say, hey, I need services, just to kind of help them with their sentencing as well and advocate for them in court.
So do you yourself interact with the criminal justice system at all?
Yes. Yeah. So I go into the 2 different jails. We have a nurse that goes in as well, and we do traumatic brain injury screenings. And we go in there and just kind of give them options for services, and then we'll work with that client depending on their charges and their situation with advocating them for treatment if appropriate. So we'll go to court, work with their attorney, work with their probation officer, and then we've started some groups like recovery meetings in the jails.
How did that program get started? Was it like, do you know if it was an advocacy thing or?
So the program came from the state of Indiana. The area they saw was higher spikes in overdoses over the years, and they realized that like that was the biggest core of the epidemic, was like the highest death rate was in that area. So the state put in this grant to say, hey, we need a team to go in and get these people linked to services. And over time, we've just kind of built partnerships, including with the jails, and they've said, hey, we'll give you this much money to come in here and run this group or give these people treatment. So our services are free as of right now because it's grant funded.
So has the criminal justice system been like open to working with you and giving clients a chance to go into this program or being flexible?
Over time, each county, I've been amazed about how like each county is its own island. So they all have their different beliefs and ideas and perspective. So it's been a matter of us coming in and proving ourselves, like what we can offer and showing them success, and then like once one county hops on and gets on board, it's like the other ones start, it's like a ripple effect. So it's been a matter of almost 3 years now trying to get these places to where they are. Just education, trauma-informed education has really changed people's perspectives and allowed us into the jails. And it was a matter of just starting with one client and the judge giving that one client a chance to where it's become now like 300 clients that have been able to go to treatment from jail.
So is it like do they have drug courts, or is it specialty courts, or is it pretty much just traditional kind of model?
Each county has its different programs. So the one county we serve is a little bit of a bigger county. They have drug court and they also have veterans court. So that's part of their release is like doing drug court, following through with us, and just having that community support kind of wraparound services. And then other counties, they don't have anything. So it's just a matter of us going up on the stand and just kind of advocating for the client, and then they'll just kind of run with it.
So what type of kind of like roadblocks have you run into, like resistance from specific people in the criminal justice system towards the work you're trying to do?
Well, some of the areas we're in aren't as progressive as far as education around mental health and substance use. So it's been a lot of, I don't want to say lack of education, but kind of lack of education with understanding mental health and substance use. So they just kind of have these ideas that they've gotten from the media or other sources to where, it's just punitive. We just want to throw them in jail. They're criminals. So there's still some judges and still some prosecutors that still have that mindset, and it makes it really difficult to work with. But I think, like I said, over time, if they can give that one person a shot and see, wow, I think that's what that person needed, it kind of opens up that door for them to see other people in that light.
So it sounds like the best thing that's helped is just kind of like these anecdotal cases where if you get the one case, then they see how that worked.
Yeah. Like I said, that's come from us just kind of pushing at the door the entire time of saying, hey, like, give us a shot. Well, this will work. And there's been some cases that have burned us just because that's part of addiction and recovery. Mm-hmm. But, it's just like that small light that we can, I always say, like, kind of plant that seed. So it may have not worked this time, but that plant might grow a little bit and they might see a little more progress.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, when I look at kind of the work you do, I see that we've been educated on the cycle of recovery, and that relapse is part of that process. And I don't know, I'm curious if you share this perspective at all, but a lot of times it seems like the judges and the DAs kind of expect this like 100% compliance and like perfection, and the one time they mess up like that or they relapse, they say, okay, so that's a failure. So like, are you having any successes on that, getting them to understand what relapse is and that it's kind of inevitable?
Yeah, like I said, it's a matter of finding the right people that are willing to give it a try. And then whether it's in court services, like just finding that right connection to where they can say, hey, let's get the judges, the social workers, some people in recovery in a room together, and let's just kind of talk this out. And just having those difficult conversations has changed a lot too. I think what's helped us is that the people on our team that are in recovery, so the recovery support specialists, they've been able to be living proof. But the cool thing is they've also grown up in those communities, so the judges have seen them over and over in their time that they were being sentenced. Probation officers are seeing it, and they're like, whoa, like that person was in the system forever, and like, look, they're out in the community working and sober. So I think that's been a big help.
Yeah, in our previous conversations, I've heard you mention these recovery support specialists a lot. Like, they're so key. Like, tell me what you feel is so important, and like why that's such a key part of this process.
So I think in the time that I've been working in the substance abuse field specifically, anytime I've met with a client, they're just like, you don't get it, because you never had that problem. And they always ask you, have you ever had an addiction? Well, no. But this recovery support specialist can come in and say, listen, been there, done that, face these barriers, got out of it. And so it's just like they're kind of that person they gravitate to because it's like they understand you. So they've been such an amazing part of the team just because they are that living proof. They understand the barriers with the system and just the barriers with the area that we live in because of the lack of resources. So that's been amazing to see.
Were they there from the get-go of your program, or was that something they had to kind of bring along?
No, they were written into the grant. In Indiana, recovery support specialist, there's the thing called ICATA, and it's basically like Indiana peer recovery coach training. And it's really taken off. I mean, we're seeing recovery support specialists in the emergency room. It's just a way to try to catch someone's attention. Like, hey, here is someone that does get it. That way they're getting resources, even in the emergency rooms, the clinics, wherever they're going. They're starting to be utilized in those areas.
Yeah, that's dope. I remember whenever we were in grad school and people came and talked to us, we were like, oh, these little school people are like, whoa, I don't know about this. Like, they don't have a college degree.
Yeah. No, like our clients, it's funny, or not our clients, the recovery support specialists, the qualifications for getting a job, you can have a felony and you can have a high school education, and that's all it takes. They get thorough training through the state on ethics, and it's our job as the clinicians to kind of clinically guide them and make clinical decisions for them, but then just having that process where like they're just kind of there as a mentor, like a peer support. So that's just a bigger, I think, almost more than what we can offer as clinicians at times.
Do you feel like that's more of an emerging field, or is it location specific, like some places? Because I feel like here we don't really, in Colorado, we don't really use them very often. Not in the rural area anyway.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't think we ever talked about peer recovery coaches in school. And even in my undergrad, I don't remember ever hearing that. So I think it is an emerging field, and I definitely think it'll take off in a matter of a few years, because just how much we've seen in the state of Indiana, the impact that they've had. So I hope that it does, because that also gives our clients just something, I think a lot of our clients struggle with like purpose in life, and I think giving them something like this can give them a lot of purpose and hope for the future.
Right, that's an important point. Like, it's something for them to aspire to, because especially when you have a felony, you've been in prison, you've been locked up, like I feel like that's a big barrier for a lot of people. Like, no one's going to give you that chance, so that's something that you can do.
Yeah,
and still feel like you're around your people.
Yeah, and talking to the recovery support specialists, like I said, I've learned so much from them, more than I would have probably in school at times, just with their life experiences. And their addiction, they burned so many bridges and burned so many relationships. This kind of gives them proof to better themselves and kind of mend those relationships, if not just like make up for the things that they've done wrong in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, so aside from that, like, what are the biggest issues that you run into?
As far as like my job?
Yeah, I mean, it's involving the criminal justice system or your clients, like that kind of thing. So barriers to their success, I don't know.
Yeah, so we live in a really rural area. There's not your typical transportation. There's no Ubers, there's no Lyfts, there's no public transportation for buses, no cabs.
That was everywhere.
No, I mean, you're gonna pay like for someone to come from Indianapolis an hour and a half away to give you a ride, and it's gonna be like $200. Wow. So we only have Catch a Ride, and then they can use like Medicab through their insurance. But again, that's comes with a fee, and they're not always reliable. And it's like a couple buses for an entire rural area. Sometimes they don't go out past a certain like outline of a neighborhood, whether like they try to stay within, I don't want to say a city because it's not a city, but the town. So out in the country, you're not accessing that either. And I see a lot more of where people are struggling are those places that are more in the country where there's like no stoplights. It's just all back roads. So transportation is a big issue. Also our mental health services and our substance abuse services. So to get someone into inpatient treatment, we're driving to either Cincinnati, Indianapolis, which is an hour and a half away, just to get someone into treatment. Because we don't have those services right there in our area. For mental health, we have a community mental health center, and to see a psychiatrist, you're waiting 2 months. And when it's immediate mental health or crisis related issues, you don't have 2 months to do that. So it's really hard to get people to buy in because they need that immediate access. So that serves as a barrier. There's more. I mean, lack of meetings, support groups. I mean, there's just, our team has introduced so many of these things and put those in place that weren't there before. So a lot of our recovery support specialists have started running their own meetings, starting like community workshops, things like that, just to kind of build that community for them that wasn't there before. Because anyone in active addiction was kind of hidden behind doors because it was so shameful for them, and just like the stigma in the community, that's a big barrier, stigma. So a lot of people won't access services, and also just like this cultural norm that this is what it is. It's, you know,
like you talk about like in their family or kind of this.
Yeah. So like, especially with the alcohol, I think in that area, that's just things people do because there's not a whole lot to do. And so drinking becomes part of like that daily routine, and it's just normalized, you know, well, my grandpa drank and my dad drank, and, you know, we get drunk or on the weekends and then come home after a hard day at work and drink a beer. And so that's been, I think, hard too, because they're literally surrounded everywhere. I mean, you can go to the grocery store and pay to drink while you shop. So your local
drink at the grocery store while you're shopping.
They have like these little things where you go in and get, like at the Kroger, they have a bar set up in the Kroger, so and so can drink while their spouse shops. So yeah, it's kind of surreal.
I always thought about that, like at malls, if they had a bar for like the dude, because you always see the guys like sitting in the middle. And
yeah,
I didn't ever think that would go for grocery stores.
Yeah, they do.
Wow, that's crazy. So is that a big part of the culture there?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I think it's because it is a rural area. There's not a whole lot of parks or anything, and so what do we do for fun? We drink. So.
Well, you're kind of in the your whole job that you do now is directly because of the opioid epidemic. And you're kind of in the heart of that in the Midwest. So what do you feel, what are the factors you feel like are influencing that? I mean, you've already touched on some.
Yeah, so there's different people looking into that, that are just part of this contract and this grant, looking into like, why is this area being hit so hard? Again, like I mentioned earlier, I think it is like the lack of mental health and substance abuse treatment. So people resort in self-medication. There's also a lot of poverty in the area. There's not a lot of opportunity for good jobs. I mean, it's all kind of minimum wage, and I think people kind of cope in that sense just to kind of numb all of the stress that comes with not having a good paying job. Like, how are you going to put food on the table? How am I going to pay my next bill? So that, and then just, I think and I don't want to like call out any doctors or anything, but just the prescription or over prescribing of opioid prescriptions instead of alternative treatment. So I think that's just become kind of this thing where they just pass that out without any other alternative options, like what am I thinking of? Acupuncture. Sorry.
Yeah. Or like yoga or any type of alternative pain medicine.
Yeah, anything that's alternative is usually going to be, anything alternative is usually going to be more expensive. So our clients, that population, they just can't afford those kind of things. So it's easier just to get a prescription.
And how many, I mean, they're probably all on Medicaid, Medicare, if even that. I doubt any of them.
Most of the clients we come across aren't insured. Or if they are, they've already burned that kind of presumptive eligibility. So they're not, and they can't really get presumptive again for another year.
Well, how much of a barrier is that to treat? I mean, you said there's no treatment as it is, and then there being poverty. I mean, then having no way to just like, because what I've seen in some of my experiences is like there are treatment options out there if you can afford like $100,000 for an inpatient, whatever. But that's not the clients I'm working with.
Right. Well, most of the treatment facilities we have, there are a lot of Medicaid options, but they're only 30 days. And I think I've learned now that, it's not going to be fixed in 30 days. If it's ever going to be fixed, I don't think it's the thing that can be fixed. It's just going to be maintained. And so that in itself is a barrier, but also if they don't have insurance and they burn that presumptive eligibility and, we can't access that for another year, we're taking them. Luckily, there are some kind of faith-based facilities that are free and long-term, but it's a matter of if our client is faith-based at that point too. So it limits them to one or two options, and sometimes it just means they have to settle for doing outpatient treatment, and inpatient would never be an option. But there are some MAT, like medication-assisted treatment programs, developing in the area. There's been a wonderful nurse practitioner in one of the areas that has been prescribing Vivitrol, and we've seen some good success from that. So even if they can't access inpatient treatment, they can access this medication that kind of helps with the cravings. And it also blocks the receptors in the brain so they don't get that same high that they would sober without the medication.
So are you seeing progress on your front, like since you started to now? Like you feel like things are getting better, you're getting there?
I don't know I think addiction is a big monster, and all the cartel being involved, like it's going to be hard to get drugs off the street. So that's, I think, the biggest battle in itself. But I am seeing an improvement as far as we're that resource now that people can just call, right away and have some kind of support that they didn't have before. And that's the biggest thing. Like, even if it's not what they want or what we want for them, it is something that wasn't there before.
So if you could change things, if you were the politician or whoever with these magic powers and you can change, how would you change the system and how it's currently functioning?
In this area specifically, I would definitely add transportation, sober livings, inpatient treatment options, better, quicker access to mental health care. I could name a lot because, like I said, it is a very depleted area with not a whole lot of resources. So just getting the resources would be a major help. And then just getting more people trauma informed and more education around mental health and substance use. Like I said, we planted that seed and we've seen a lot of growth, but there's still people in the community we're not accessing, like community members, their peers that still have that old school mentality of like, no, we're not going to Narcan them, just let them die. That's still kind of hard to educate on just because I don't have access to those individuals unless I drive home to home. So, and if I did that, they wouldn't be very welcoming at all.
Well, another thing I'm curious of is you have an interesting perspective, and I guess, both of us do, because we're in similar situations where we were in a major metropolitan area, we were working in a large city, and then we moved out to these rural areas. So you described how resources are different out there, but do you see the clients present with different issues than you did in the metropolitan areas?
I think trauma is pretty common across the board with metropolitan and rural areas, but I feel like in the rural areas, there is so much more trauma, different trauma, I guess. I see a lot of just generations and generations of trauma in the families, whether it's poverty or just abuse, the mental health, like it all just adds, it's more, I guess, the multi-factors that go into one thing rather than just like treating one issue, you're treating 10 underlying issues. So I think I just see a lot more of that, especially just because I think they're trying to survive and they've put themselves in, not themselves, but like people have put them in very vulnerable positions to survive. But there are like common factors that you would see in the city as far as like the same issues with poverty, but there's just not as many opportunities in these areas for them to even thrive or even get out of that setting. In the city, you have more access to jobs to try to get more independence, but in the rural areas, it's like, I don't even know where to start. It's a thing for people just to even go to college in that area. So,
or even know what it is.
Yeah.
kind of live in a like a vacuum. It's like another reality.
Yeah.
You know, I wish I could take some of the kids that I work with and like bring them to Boulder or something like that, just to like
Yeah.
so they could be exposed to something, because they like don't understand.
Yeah. Because
You could do they.
yeah, I had a client that I worked with in Denver that had said, like, you don't think outside the box, you were
I
born into.
remember. Yeah.
I have still taken that with me everywhere to this day, and I'll share
Yeah.
that with clients. Like, it's hard to see outside the four walls of that box because this is what's been ingrained in you since day one. And
Mm-hmm.
it's also, I think, because I've been there myself, getting out of that, it's almost like shameful to leave where you're from too, because it's just like that stigma of like, oh, look, she thinks she's something now for bettering herself. Like, there's just kind of that, I think, grudge that people hold against people that do try to better themselves in the community.
Yeah, that itself is so powerful. Like, I wanted to talk more about that because I remember you telling me
Yeah.
about that, and that really stuck with me.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just like, how dare you leave us here kind of thing.
Like
And
crabs in a barrel.
yeah, like I busted my butt to get out of where I was from, but like there's always something that drew me back in. And I think it was just like, there's such, as much as there's our struggles, there's such a sense of community and protection over each other. Like that's your family, even if you don't even know them that well, just because there's, I think, that sense of pride of where you're from, and like help where you're from first before you go out and try to just leave them. I don't know. I always felt this kind of guilt that brought me back to just help.
So did you get any pushback when you came back?
No, not from like community members necessarily, but for clients, they do sometimes say like, oh, you're going to shine that fancy degree in my face. And that is probably the most pushback I've gotten, just because like I think they haven't had those opportunities, and I don't know, I don't know how to explain it really. It's just different.
Yeah. Well, there's not as much of respect for higher education because of that lived experiences, which is crucial for the people, the recovery. What do you call them there? Recovery coaches?
Recovery support specialists.
Recovery support specialists. Yeah. The people that have been through it, they feel like they just, their guard comes down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just flashed the tattoo, so then they're like, "Oh, this dude's cool."
Yeah. But I mean, even the recovery support specialists I've worked with, they even said, I mean, I think we just, as humans, we automatically kind of just put things in a category, and they thought I was going to be a snooty, stuck-up bitch because of, I got a degree. And so just kind of being able to level with them a little bit. But I think that's just them trying to protect themselves because they've been stigmatized and judged for so long that you naturally have that guard up. So I would love for you to be able to talk to one of them. I think that would be a huge addition to all of this.
Right. Maybe someday. Someday we'll do it. I know
I have people that probably be willing to talk to you about it.
Well. So on that front, like we try to. I mean, we not like we've been doing this forever, but like I know that our intelligence and our experience has increased a lot since we first started doing this. So if you could go back to Meg, first started grad school with this idea, oh, I'm gonna be a social worker, I'm gonna change the world. Like what advice would you give her now in what you know now?
Be prepared to make many mistakes and be okay with that. I came in thinking I had to follow by the textbook, and I feel like a lot of what you learn in the textbook just goes out the window because you've got to meet the clients where they're at, and telling them, tell me how you feel about that isn't going to fly with them. So I think really understanding the culture you're working with and the population and their values and morals, getting ahead of that, because you've got to meet them where they're at. And sometimes that puts you in uncomfortable positions. Where I'm at, unfortunately, is very rural and conservative, and I still see clients with, Nazi tattoos or swastikas and things like that. And I have to leave my judgment at the door with that, because that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to help this client get recovery. So just trying to be open-minded, not to those things necessarily, but just open-minded to your client and what is important to them. So just, yeah, and just learning to make mistakes. I mean, there's a lot of growing pains that come with being in this field. What I thought I knew fresh out of grad school, I look back at and laugh now, because you just learn so much by just working in it and hitting those different barriers and different challenges of like, I don't know what to do with this client, and just kind of just allowing yourself to just sit there and just think about it at times. You know, it doesn't have to be fixed today. These clients have been living like this for years, so it's not going to be fixed in a day, and just learning that it's okay to just take it slow. And yeah. And also that, you know, be prepared to take that cape off, because you're not going to be the superhero at times. There's times you're going to lose. There's times where you're not going to be able to do anything, and just being able to process that and take care of yourself through all of that. I mean, there's a lot more barriers than what I was prepared for.
Yeah, I think a lot of people and they first start getting interested in being a social worker, this kind of work, maybe for they don't realize it at the time, but self-righteous reasons, because they're thinking like, oh, I want to change the world, I want to make a difference. And I guess my advice to people is like, you make a difference, you're not going to see it. And if a client is like immediately making changes, like your radar should probably be up, because they're probably bullshitting you.
Yeah. And I think grad school kind of paints this pedestal of like what you can accomplish by advocating for your clients, but like 9 times out of 10, the advocacy work you do is going to be shut down, and you've got to just be okay with that. Not okay with it, but know when to pick your battles.
Shot down by your clients, or shot down by like the system?
The system in general. You know, like I said earlier, you know, presenting to a judge, you know, I sat in court one time, and I had a judge flat out say to me and the client, I don't think relapse is part of recovery. I think that's a bullshit excuse. I don't care what the professionals say. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there as a professional in this field like, okay, so that's where we're at with that level of respect here. So just, you know, like I can't sit there and argue with him, because that's going to make things worse. So I just sit back and like, okay, what do we got to do now?
Yeah, so how do you deal with that? Because me being open and honest, like that's my biggest frustration. So it's not the clients, it's like the professionals professionals, right? That are supposed to be educated or open to education and research, and they like don't give a shit or don't want to listen because they think they know it. Like, how do you deal with that frustration?
Yeah, because I walked out of that court hearing that day, and my client, you know, they've been used to being treated like that, which doesn't make it right, but they're just kind of like, whatever, it rolls off their shoulder. But for someone that hasn't had to hear things like that as much, it's just like, you know what, that really pisses me off. And so I always give myself a day to kind of decompress and like process and be upset about it. And then I always look at, okay, what are we going to do from here? Because if I sit there and dwell on it, I'm only going to get burnt out. So really just being able to process with like my supervisor, and just having that outlet is always important, because you're going to need it.
Right. And I think that's key. Maybe that's a big reason for burnout in our field is it's you're wanting to have this effect and maybe for me, I realized like all the issues I was gonna run into with clients, but it's like I didn't realize how fucked up the system really was.
Yeah.
And it's a big, heavy, complex system, and you think you're gonna change this system?
Yeah.
In seeing that, like what you said with your client, when you're like so up there and you're ready and you're vouching for your client, you're like, I'm gonna be the advocate, the super advocate, and then the judge just shoots that down. You're like, ooh.
Yeah.
You realize that I like it's like traumatizing for us, but then yeah, this is what our clients go through all the time. That's why they have no hope.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember getting in front of a prosecutor and, you know, advocating for a client to get into treatment. And part of it was that the attorney called me the same day to get up on the stand, and I wasn't prepared. I didn't have my basic information about the client in front of me. I mean, I was carrying a large caseload at that time, and, you know, asking me things like, what's your client's age? And I'm like, 20 something. And then, you know, what's their criminal history? So as frustrating as those moments have been, and as like embarrassing as those moments have been on the stand, at the same time, that's what has made me way stronger in the long run, because it makes my assessments more thorough. And just knowing what questions to ask and also knowing how to respond, after that moment. And it's funny because I sat down with my client and was like, they knew more than I did about how to deal with that kind of stuff. So just kind of taking their advice and feedback on things, because like I said, they've been to court a number of times. They know what's going to lead to an open-ended question with the prosecutor is going to slam 5 things at you for saying it that way. So, they've told me themselves, and just coworkers, like, no, you don't have to say anything like that. So I think what I had said was, I just don't tie any opinions. I keep it factual, because as soon as you put in like any educational piece that involves any opinion to them, they're going to use that as backfire on you. So I'm just learning to just stick to the facts. And when they ask me for recommendations, I don't make recommendations in court. It's like, that's up to you guys. I'm just here to advocate for recovery. So
yeah, lawyers go through a way different education process than social workers.
Yeah. So just like I said, in those times, as frustrating as it gets, just kind of patting yourself on the back, because like, hey, this is going to make you stronger in the long run.
Yeah,
so
like
just learning that
not
system.
being afraid to make those mistakes, because it's just part of the process of learning. That's what makes you better.
Yeah. And just, educating, it wasn't just social work education, it's education on the law, seeing it from like how probation officers see it, just trying to pull all those pieces in together, because it's not just your perspective, it's 10 other perspectives coming in, and you have to be able to see it from their ways as well to kind of, advocate in a way that works with them as well, because we're not in charge in any way.
No. And sometimes it's hard for me to realize that as much as I try to fight the system, I'm a cog in that wheel too,
Yeah.
I'm part of the system. And sometimes you got to learn how to play the system's rules, or else the system will play you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I always tell my clients whenever they meet with me, like, especially in the jails, like, hey, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole here, so we're going to work together to kind of figure this out. And I think just giving them that autonomy, and I think that empowers them more too, because then they can walk away knowing like, hey, I learned this, I can do this on my own next time. And that's our biggest goal, is just to give them that independence in the long run, to work the system, to find those resources and be an advocate for themselves.
Well, what's your advice for all the other social workers out there who might be listening to this right now, or aspiring future people that are thinking about giving this a try? Like, what would you tell them?
Really find what population you want to work with, taking your strengths and kind of seeing that at times what you think isn't going to be what's good for the client. So, when I first started this job, I used to think like, and I even learned this in school, like, it's not 100% recovery. Sometimes it's a matter of harm reduction, and being okay with that for your client. Like I said, they're the one that takes the reins on this. Like, we don't have any say in what they do. So just sometimes like taking those small victories. Like, one victory for me was a client that was like, I'm never going to stop shooting up heroin. And I had to, accept that. Like, that's where my client is at right now. No matter what kind of motivational interviewing I do, he's not ready. And so it was just a matter of giving him a harm reduction kit and saying, you know what, can we do this more safely then? Or can you have Narcan sitting by you and a friend sitting with you when you shoot up? Like, sometimes taking those things as small victories, and that, it's not the ideal situation, but just knowing that that's going to happen. Like I said earlier, like, you're not going to be able to fix everything. You're not going to be able to change everything, and just being open-minded and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the things you're really saying that I think I agree with is just don't be attached to an outcome.
Yeah. Go in expecting, and I don't want to say like expect nothing, but like let your client kind of set the tempo for what their success is going to look like. And just kind of being challenging to see it from different ways. But at the end of the day, we're there to support them, and that may be positive support, and it may just be harm reduction support.
Right. maybe we try to be in control too much, and our
Yeah.
clients don't they live in their worlds where the only control sometimes they have is that drug. Like that's their
Yeah.
only form of control. Like drugs are a powerful thing, and so
Right.
we're sitting here trying to take control away from them. Like it's not going to end well. It's a power struggle.
Right. Right. Yeah, because I mean, any client that I've had that has been court ordered hasn't been as successful. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is that, it's a matter of when they're ready and what they're willing to change before it's really, you're going to see that success.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, then that sucks too. I mean, it's a hard argument to make because I tell them all the time, like everybody eventually you're going to realize like you can fight the man all day long, but the man always wins unless you are the man. Unless you're a rich white man,
Yes.
then the man's gonna win, bro. And like the people that get out of the system are the ones that figure that out, and the ones that keep fighting the man just get further entrenched in that wheel.
Yeah.
That's my tangent for the day. Well, what do you love about your job, Megan?
I love my team. That's the number one thing. I think that's what's kept me, fueled through all of this is just having a supportive team. I'm surrounded, luckily, by a bunch of passionate individuals that go tooth and nail every day to help our clients. And I think and that's another piece of advice, just making sure you're in an environment where you're supported. That's going to, outrule anything else involved. I have a good supervisor that's working with me on my clinical license. She's super supportive as far as just like, if I need to pick up the phone and call her right away, she's right there. So just having that team that keeps that passion going, we're all like-minded as far as what our goals are for the communities, for ourselves, and for our clients. I also love just like the independence I have with my job. There's no really strict guidelines telling me what I have to do for the client. It's not someone coming in saying these interventions need to be met by this time. When I did home-based therapy, I felt like I had a timeline, and with this, I don't. If I need to extend the client past 60 days, I can extend them past 60 days, or I can renew their timeline as far as if they need to be seen for 60 days or 6 months. And it's going in there, like I said, and meeting the client where they're at with no rules besides, where we're getting them to, and as long as the client is safe.
So you're really able to like individualize treatment in that way?
Yeah. So I can go in and tell a client, where are you at today? What do you want to do? What are your goals? And they get to make those decisions. It's not like I have to go meet with the client and say, you're going to inpatient treatment today. I go in there and say, I'm just here to support what you want and help you get through the barriers. And so just having that, every case looks different and every outcome looks different. And that's something that keeps it interesting for me. It doesn't get routine. But also just, I love being out in the community, boots on the ground kind of thing. Just, going out there in their home, seeing their reality, and just being able to meet them. Like I said, meet them where they're at. I say that a lot, but it's true. Like there's nothing like being in the client's home with them.
Well, on that note, how are you adjusting to the quarantine, the pandemic we currently find?
It's been really difficult. I spent a lot of time thinking about that when you kind of gave me the questions ahead of time. There's so many barriers with this COVID stuff because, what we were doing before was just a matter of ease, just going into their homes same day. And now it's like there's this huge wall we have to face, Like I said earlier, it's a rural area, so a lot of people don't even have access to technology. And if they do have it, it's service, it's being able to access Wi-Fi. And it's not like a matter of them, I say, hey, go to your public library then and print this off. I mean, they don't have access to anything. Everything's shut down. So we've been having to right now just get the verbal consent. And then when we can meet with them at some point, it's just a matter of getting them to a safe place. And there's just things I've thought about that I wouldn't typically think about, like the worries that other people have. I'm like, that's nothing compared to what our clients are facing, like a liquor store shutting down to the general population is just going to be like, oh man, I can't drink. But like for some clients, their lifeline. Like if you're closing that liquor store, you're taking my client's lifeline away. That's what's keeping them alive. Like just the dangers that come with taking something away like that, because then they can go into withdrawal, and our treatment facilities are limited right now because they're not accepting new people. So, that client's withdrawing at home without safe medication or safe medical care. They can't even get into treatment. And so it's so crucial to catch them when they're ready, because that can change in a matter of an hour, a day, so that's why we are emergency response, because we realize like you got to meet them now when they're ready, before the dope dealer comes around, before that next paycheck comes around, to where they change their mind. So that's been a barrier. Jails.
How are you doing that virtually?
So we have Zoom, kind of like what we're doing now. If they have phones, we'll try to do that. If not, we're just taking paperwork and dropping it off at their front door and waiting for them to come out, and then sitting out in our cars until they fill it out and bring it back. But that in itself, like I always say that too, there's such a disconnect even with technology or not being able to see someone. Like for me to do my assessments, I don't feel like they're near as thorough now because I can't properly assess the body language and, see their presenting behaviors. So they can tell me they have anxiety.
Be shooting up right in front of you, you wouldn't even know.
Yeah, and they can tell me they have anxiety on paper, like experiencing anxiety, but anxiety looks very different for individuals depending on what they're going through. So is this anxiety that's going to be like leading to suicidal ideation, or is this just general anxiety? So it's really hard to do that because a lot of our clients sometimes just don't even like to talk on the phone. So just even getting the paperwork signed is taking a whole long process that's typically an hour is now 3 hours because we're waiting on signatures, we're waiting for them to send it back. So if they don't have phones, I mean, it's almost impossible unless we're, driving out there. But even in itself, when you've got an intake that has all these words and questions, I mean, that's overwhelming when you can't really walk a client through that. So other barriers are had down. Like I said, the lack of transportation there already was. Now Catch a Ride's not running because of COVID, so now they don't have any transportation. I said treatment facilities, not being able to meet face-to-face. Also, if you are seeing a client with mental health issues with technology, I think even technology itself can add to the level of paranoia. If you have a client with extreme mental health issues or they're withdrawing from meth and having psychosis, and they're already, seeing drones and thinking like the government's after them, having something recording them or in front of them, it's a strange face. I think that just adds to the paranoia that they already have. So that's a barrier. Also, just the small area with the limited resources, that just adds to like the poverty. All these people that are already struggling before now are out of work. Even clients that are coming fresh out of jail trying to get a job, they have these probation fees and all this. Well, how am I supposed to pay this when I can't even get a job right now? Yeah. And it's already a barrier for them to get a job if they have a felony, but then adding this COVID, it's just an already impoverished area is suffering even more.
Yeah, it's going to be a weird next few years.
Yeah.
It's going to be a weird year, and then the next few years after that, it's going to be
yeah. And I just feel for the clients because sometimes treatment or just even getting out of the house is such an outlet, and now they've been restricted to their homes where most of the trauma has occurred or most of their triggers exist, and they can't get out of that space. So that's really scary too.
Yeah, I've been wanting to look up statistics on whether, I know domestic violence, they're worried about that going up, but are overdoses going up, suicides, M1 holds? I don't know if that's what they call them there, but mental health.
Yeah, M1 holds. I don't have access to that, so if we're not getting a referral for it, we're not hearing about it. I would imagine though that the urges to use are increased because of being stuck in a home with nothing to do, and there's no meetings, there's no outlet or anything for them to have someone to talk to even. So I think that in itself, like I said, even all the mental health facilities around, they go see their counselor once a week, and now that's been limited to once every 2 weeks because they're trying to access everybody else through this. So yeah, it's just a scary, odd time.
Scary odd time. That's perfect.
Yeah. And I don't, you worry when this is all going to be over, and it's kind of like my brother, the county he lives in, they lifted the ban for like a day, and then the next day they had 107 cases, so they're back in red. And it's just like, is that what's going to happen when these restrictions lift? Is it just going to like start the process over again? And for some, we don't have time. So
right. Yeah, there's got to be some kind of a coherent plan, because it's going to be, this thing is not going away. This is like,
right, like
this is here now. And so how can you stagger it so that it's not overwhelming the hospitals?
And I think that's probably the long-term goal, is to get more access to the hospitals again, because they're just so overwhelmed right now. So I think that's probably part of this quarantine, is to give the hospitals time to prep, because this is going to be an ongoing thing.
Yeah, it should be like wartime prep is what it looked like. I guess I'm getting political, but we need to get all the PPE we possibly can over there, got all the ventilators, all the, hopefully I know there's a ton of research going on right now on how to treat it, but time productively. Hopefully somebody up there is like doing something other than twiddling their thumbs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How are you yourself coping?
I am, when the weather's nice and spending a lot of time outside, going on walks, that kind of recharges me. I spend a lot of times like with my dogs, just kind of hanging out, eating healthier, and just, it's almost, we were talking, my partner and I were talking about this, like I feel less productive now that I'm home every day than I was when I had that structure. Like now I see it, how my clients see it, like without that structure, things can fall apart really quickly, like the laundry's piling up all of a sudden. And I just feel more tired right now on the weekends. And I don't know if it's just because my job wasn't the typical routine I had every day. So it's presented more challenges and I'm more mentally exhausted, but just trying to keep things structured as much as I can within my household to not get tired and stay motivated, because it's easy, especially when you're sitting at home on your computer on your couch, it's easy to like want to take a nap, because I'm not in my car or out in the community just going off of adrenaline. It's like, oh, okay. So just trying to keep myself busy, because anyone that has time on their hands, I think it's easy just to let that time go quickly.
Yeah, we could do a whole separate thing about ways of coping and productive and unproductive ways, and falling down the rabbit hole. But I guess trying to kind of figure out some sort of system, and hopefully, as the weeks go by, we get better at that.
But. Because I think this is going to be a new norm for a while, unfortunately. But I think it's amazing. I've seen the community pull together so far. That's been, like I said, with all the cynical things I've said about the barriers, there is a lot of strength in all of this too. Like our recovery sports specialist, they started a virtual meeting, and that's had over 300 attendees each week. And so, as many barriers are as in place, they still have that, and they're getting something rather than nothing. And that's what I've got to kind of keep in my mind at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, and the small part of me, this very small optimistic part of me, sees that maybe that's the good thing, and that it's inspired the system to change. Like, the system is so bass backwards and so outdated that like now they have to do virtual visits. So like that would kind of solve that problem you were talking about with transportation issues and people getting well, then you bring the meeting to the people.
That's been my biggest concern, though. Even in the media, it's just like there's concerns about the businesses with food and all of that and retail, but like no one's really talking, again, as usual, no one's really talking about mental health or substance use and how that's being impacted. So like this is probably the first conversation I've had about that with anybody, and it's not on the media headlines like, what about these clients, what about people working on recovery? And so I think it's good to have those conversations, because it's a very real struggle right now for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's been on my mind, but it's still so fresh that I haven't really seen how this is going to go and how this is going to impact.
Mm,
I feel like we're still all kind of in shock, and we're like,
yeah, yeah, and still trying to adapt, I think, because every state is kind of at a different level in their quarantine and the changes. Like I have a friend on social media that posted about her kids in Florida this morning. They're still in school, so I'm like, well, they're not even beginning to get into what we're getting into up here. So
I
that's
don't know. I'm like Florida. I'm like, y'all got all them old people over there. If anybody should be taking this in, it's y'all. I've been there, man. It seems like a big ass retirement home over there.
yeah, because she was posting her daughter going to prom and being asked to prom. I was like, what? Like these kids up here already, they're not having a prom. Like they're not going back to school. So
Oh,
it's going to impact people at different times. And I think Indiana has been hit by the worst of it right now. I've heard April's supposed to be worse, which I hope not. But we just got to be ready, like you said earlier, with the battle. Just be ready for the battle. And,
yeah. Day by day.
so that's what's
Until
kind of keeping
then,
me motivated too right now. Is just like my clients really need me and more than ever, and so that's kind of been motivating.
how's your dog responding to you being around all the time?
Oh, they love it. They love it. The Chihuahua like sits behind the couch all day with his head on my shoulder, like this is life. And I wasn't gonna like I do get to work from home at times, so it's not like they spend like 8 or 9 hours in the crate. But I mean, they can go outside whenever they want. If it's nice out, I'm sitting out on my patio, so they're out running around chasing the squirrels. So they love it. They'll be in shock when I go back. Like yesterday, we went to the grocery for a little bit, and they were in the crate, and they're probably like, "What are my humans doing?"
Forgot what this thing is.
Yeah. So grocery bills have definitely increased though because it's easy to just sit around and eat your food all day.
Mm.
So
I've kind of limited myself now that I'm trying not to go there very often. So just kind of like buy a whole bunch and then
yeah, that's what we
that's what my
try.
parents used to do back in the day. Like, but I got too used to the whole like, oh, I'm just gonna grab something.
Yeah. Well, we grab so my parents like live on a farm and they kind of produce everything themselves from like the garden and then their own beef and all that. So we've gotten stuff from them to try to avoid the grocery stores and that's been nice. So they're living life because they don't have to go to the grocery store right now.
Well, and
But
you got them chickens.
yeah, well, my chickens are going to be sacrificed throughout eating a lot of eggs from the chickens, though.
Yeah. Once the poor chicken that stops producing egg, that's on the list.
Yeah, yeah. Survival instinct right here. What are you going to do for me? No, but I don't feel as much worry for myself, and I get kind of frustrated with people around me that are getting upset over petty things because I'm like, you don't even know what the struggle's like. So, yeah, that's what keeps me from getting frustrated with all this too, because it is hard being quarantined every day. I mean, I'm not used to I'm a social being, so being tied up in my house to the same things every day, it's really hard. And luckily, I have that privilege with technology and having those things to where I don't struggle in the same extent. Like I can still communicate with my family and see them, virtually every day. But it really humbles me to think about like some of our clients don't have that. So it just keeps me grounded and thankful for what I do have. And, when I start to get upset, I'm like, you know what? Don't even start because your client would love to be in your position right now. So
it's a great perspective on it.
Yeah, and I wish other people would see it that way too. Don't think about yourselves. Think about the people in your community that are struggling.
I think about that in general, just all the time.
Yeah. But I think that's natural for us because of our field and our education. So
and maybe I'm speaking for you, but because of my education and like my own kind of work that I've been through, I have the mindset now to realize like when I'm starting to get anxious or like I feel that, whereas our clients maybe don't have those skills and so they're not able to self-regulate as well. They don't see it like starting to come up, like the signs of anxiety, that kind of thing.
And I think with like their trauma responses and what's been taught or the way they've coped for so long, They just react. You know, that's what's normal to them. And that's part of addiction. Like you just go seek to smash those feelings right away with a drug. And, you know, they're not even able to access those as easily now either. Yeah, like even this morning I was thinking, so like our stimulus.
Drug dealer on quarantine too?
Yeah. But I was thinking about like the stimulus checks and how like that's so great for so many people right now. But then I will like thinking about my clients, like that money is great, but at the same time, if I'm struggling and I'm a person in active addiction, what am I going to do with that $1,200? I'm going to go see the dope man, you know? So that's been on the back of my mind too. I'm just seeing this thing in a whole different perspective than what other people are seeing it.
Yeah, when I think of rural communities, I think of some of the reservations that I've been to and I've worked with. And I mean, everybody thinks like, oh, they get this money every month. But you go there and there's not, similar to the rural areas you're talking about, like there's no industry. There's no sense of like, oh, well, I could go work at this place. There's a big casino, but then what else is there? What else?
Yeah. And I can't remember the book. I'm going to have to ask my supervisor because she had it. But it talked about like why certain populations it just becomes their like standard socialized norm when they get those big tax returns each year. You know, you think they'd put that back for, you know, improving the house or, you know, getting out of the neighborhood that they're in. But I've got to get that to you because it's a really interesting book because it talks about like how that's not important to them. So their values, like they're going to go out and buy a new computer that, you know, they wouldn't be able to typically afford or the newest iPhone because they value different things. And so sometimes with that population, they can value materials where we, like other people in the middle class or upper class are going to value like stabilization. And so I need to get that to you because that's really kind of interesting to talk about how different people see things differently as far as that money and whenever they get those tax returns. And that's the same thing with like the stimulus checks. Like they might not be thinking about trying to pay their bills. They might have something else in mind that's more important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that our government sometimes is a little short-sighted and just like, oh, just throw money at it. It's fine. And they don't think about investing. And it's not about giving people money so much as it's about like providing social capital. And that's kind of been, maybe it's a little controversial on my side. I don't know if I see, but like the whole idea behind reparations, or it's like, if you just give people money, like, is that really investing in the community and then like investing in the people and giving? So like right now, if we were to, instead of giving people $1,200, like for people that like lack job, well, let's provide them some training that they could do while they're, or, you know, some, like what happened in 100 years ago during the wars, they provide this huge big community infrastructure project to like give people training, give people work, like give people something to do. You just give people money while they're sitting around. Probably not. I know me, when I get money, I might not spend it on the smartest things.
Yeah, no, it just goes back to like kind of what we talked about earlier. Like you give someone that much money and you need those like job training programs, that structure. And so if you give me $1,200 and I don't have anything to do with it, I'm just going to blow it. Whereas if like you have intentions behind what you're giving me through job training, or like, I think of the place in Indianapolis, they have a culinary school, but it's designed specifically for people coming out of prison or jails. And it's just training them and getting them placed, but like there's no fees involved. And so it's just kind of making them more productive in society again, rather than saying, hey, I'm going to give you this $1,500, $2,000 to go get your life started. Like I'd rather have that training because they haven't had that their entire lives. So.
Yeah, and I'm not downplaying, you know, the impact of poverty on our populations and how in one respect, $1,200 is a lot of money.
Right.
But then in another respect, it's really not that much.
Right.
The cost of living now.
Yeah, I mean, by the time you get groceries, and if you have kids, even that, I mean, groceries and medical bills, I mean, that $1,200 goes nowhere, especially with the cost of living. Like I said, like rent is insane. So, I mean, that's not even probably touching rent half the time, depending on where you live.
I know. Yeah, again, I could go on tangents forever.
Yeah.
Nobody's paying me. I'm not the one in charge of this shit, so.
Yeah.
I don't see anything changing anytime soon.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to do a part 2
Okay.
after all this is over, and we'll see how things have changed and how we've adjusted, and
Yeah.
how we changed, and that all that.
Come back to me in like 3 months.
Yeah.
That'll
You're
be
all
interesting.
disheveled and
Yeah, because this is only like for us, this is only like 3 weeks in. So I think we're going to see a lot more repercussions with all of this. Right now, we're just trying to keep, like I said earlier, adapt and transition, but the repercussions are going to be coming soon. Like,
I don't feel like we still completely recovered from 2008, even though like technically the economy was like up, but still people, I mean, there's a lot of mistrust because of how that went down, and people are still struggling. I feel like that was a big causer of the opioid epidemic. And so add this on top of it. Yeah, this is
yeah,
gonna change society probably permanently.
right. Yeah, it definitely adds to the issues that were already in place. So,
All right, cool. Well, until then, this has been fun.
yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Great advice, Meg. Well, that's it for episode 1. I hope you found it interesting. I know I really enjoyed that conversation with Megan. We ended up talking for quite a while after that. It's interesting how this quarantine, I felt, has brought us a little closer together in some ways, because it feels like people, I'm hearing from people I haven't heard from in a minute. So maybe that's a good thing. And more projects like this coming out, I feel like more people are opening up and reaching out. So hopefully this continues to be a thing. We'll see how it goes. Stay tuned for episode 2. Peace.